Welcome, community members, to another exciting episode of Breaking Bread Infinity Podcast. I am your host, Moni Love, and today we have an icon, a gem, a magnificent individual. What's his name? Brother Ron Chisholm. Yes, an icon that has set foot in our city for decades, and he has a gem of information. Be prepared, put your seatbelts on as we welcome Brother Ron Chisholm and we break bread with him. Tune in. Welcome to Breaking Bread. And we're out in the community with some phenomenal people today. Well, one particular person that I am intrigued and honored to talk to today. And I will have him introduce himself.
Good. Thank you, and good morning to both of you all. I'm glad to be part of this discussion, and I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot from you all as well. And again, my name is Ronald Chisholm. I'm the co-founder of an organization called the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. I'm a community organizer. I'm an anti-racist organizer based here in New Orleans for at least 40, 50 years, but I've been in New Orleans for 80 years. And I've been trying to make a difference in the community, and I'm excited about being able to share some thoughts primarily on how to be an effective and a strategic organizer that develops leadership. I've been in New Orleans for 80 years. I've been married for 57 years. I have 2 grandkids. My daughter is one of the administrative directors here at the People's Institute, and one of my grandkids is one of the trainers who can do this whole process. Her name Jessica, and I really, having her as a young baby and seeing her as up in age now and be able to do this work, it elates me quite a bit. So I'm glad to be here, glad to have this dialogue, and glad to meet both of you all.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. And he said trying, y'all. I think he's done it.
Yeah.
He used that word, but he has absolutely done it, especially with the foundation of the People's Institute. So those who don't know about the People's Institute, could you tell us a little bit about that?
I'll be very glad to. As again, we call ourselves the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. When we first started, we had a name called the People's Institute for Survival. And when I realized that name is not a good name, because when I see folks in the community and I say, what's going on? They say, brother, I'm trying to survive. Yeah. So I changed the name because I didn't want to give people the idea of surviving as a good thing. Right. So we call it the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. So if they're going to internalize something beyond survival, they got to know that there's a beyond. So that's how it became the name. But even before the Institute, I've been in New Orleans all my life, and I've been doing community work in an area called Treme. Treme, Treme, is one of the oldest black neighborhoods in the United States. Some of the greatest musicians in the world. Trombone Shorty, Wynton Marsalis, the brass bands, Louis Armstrong, Mahalia Jackson, and many, many, many great artists and cultural legends come from the Treme community. Treme community has been a backbone for the state and for the country, even though people recognize the French quarters. But Treme is the roots are there, and many people have benefited from Treme. And that's why we think it's important to keep Treme alive. But as I was doing community work in New Orleans, I worked at LSU Medical School as a technician for many years. I never thought about community work, but then when I got to LSU, being a technical assistant to some doctors, I worked in an area called neuropathology. And neuropathology, when somebody dies, you learn about the pathology of the brain. And I was an assistant to a neuropathologist. I learned a lot about the brain. When somebody would die, the doctor would ask me to take the brain and we put it in formaldehyde and we examine the brain. The doctors did that, and I was there with the doctor. And I learned so much about what goes on inside the brain. So as I worked at LSU, I realized there was a lot of inequities you didn't see that many black people in any key positions at LSU. And I didn't see many, actually I didn't know there was any black physicians, any black medical students. I really didn't pay attention initially, but then as I worked there a while, I realized everybody was in key position was white people. And so I began to raise a little challenge inside the job. I mean, I don't think the doctors really appreciated it, but I just kept doing it. Me and another young man named Jim Hayes. Jim Hayes was from Tremay, I was from the 3rd Ward. And we would both go to the job, and we would always create some challenges and push people. And again, eventually we knew we were going to have to leave. And eventually we did leave, and I think they wanted us to go. And then when we left LSU and we started our own community organization. Then we didn't know what we were doing. We called it the Tremay Community Improvement Association. Initially it was the 6th Ward improvement, then we changed that because 6th Ward is only one ward, so we said we're going to broaden this base. It needs to be Tremay, which is a larger geographical area. So we started doing community work, didn't know what we were doing. Same thing we were doing at LSU, we saw injustice, we saw slum landlords, we saw environmental racism, we saw toxic waste, we saw racial inequity in the medical field, all that.
What year was this?
This was in 1970, the middle and the late 70s. And so we hadn't started this organization yet. I want you to put that in kind of, we just left a job. Yeah. I don't have a college background. I got, high school, and I got a lot of experiences. So we just kept, Jim Hayes and I kept fighting injustice, and we would organize people in the community by having cleanup campaigns. And people would even laugh at us, even folks in the neighborhood would laugh. But we kept doing it. Yeah. And eventually people in the neighborhood that was laughing and, then began to work with us. And we worked with hardcore heroin addicts. It wasn't crack at the time. And a lot of brothers primarily was getting arrested, and the police would arrest people based on, to show predominantly white people that we're fighting crime. They would arrest heroin addicts on a corner, and everybody would see it on 6 o'clock news, and where they do the walk, they get 10 brothers at hand, and white people would feel much more secure because they figure they're locking up crime. But to bust heroin addicts on the corner wasn't no big thing. They were right there on the corner. But it made people, and so the media and all the people was all, to me, in cahoots. And at that time, there wasn't hardly any black police officers. And so we would fight, and at the time there was a mayor named Mayor Moon Landrew. Was the mayor, and we got to know him primarily because we would raise hell, and he would say all this on TV. We started getting on TV, and we'd have press conferences. We started learning how to do all of that. And we would take abandoned cars that the city wouldn't move. We'd get the community together and take the abandoned car and slide it across the whole street. Nobody could pass, so they had to do something with it. We did a lot of things and got a lot of attention. We was on a lot of newspapers. And, but what I didn't understand at the time, as we did rent strikes.
Did rent strikes?
Did rent strikes. I learned that out of New York and Boston. I used to travel a lot. And they got books on it where you could withhold your rent. And I got a couple of lawyers. I was a paralegal too, and I worked at Northern Legal Services, and I knew a lot of the new lawyers that were coming out. So I would talk with them, because we didn't have no lawyers, just Jim and I, to research the law about, because slum landlords was being abusive to residents. Doing whatever they want. They let the house deteriorate, and then they use it as a tax write-off. Yeah. So they made money both ways. You had to pay your rent, and if it deteriorated, they didn't have to fix it. And when it deteriorated so bad, they would make money off the taxes. So we didn't know what to do, so we did some research, and we asked the lawyers to research for us. And then in a research, the state legislative, we found out there was a law called Article 2694, which means a tenant has a right to withhold rent to make repairs. And once we found that law out, then we started withholding the money and putting the money in an escrow account to make sure you don't spend it. But that money that we were saving we wouldn't give it to the landlord. We would take the money from the residents and a resident, and we had the rent, but we showed them the law, and they couldn't kick the tenants out. So we save enough money, and we would take that money and fix the house up.
Yeah.
And that really upset the landlords because the law said we could do that, and you couldn't kick the people out.
Right.
So after about a month of that, then the landlords started coming to meet with us. I need my rent. I need my rent. These were scrupulous landlords. So we say, we give you rent, but you got to commit to fix this place up. So they wasn't making 100% profit. So we did that. Not only that, we put together a piece of law. We said we're going to develop a rent control here. I knew it was in New York. I knew it was in Boston. And we got to get 10,000 registered voters in order to present this to city council and then bring it to another level. And we got over 12,000 registered voters, so that gave us political leverage. Politicians saw that.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
They said, damn,
Right.
they saw that. And so we realized we had some leverage now. Not that we was even looking for that. We set up tables and chairs in front of Charity Hospital. Anyway, there was a loud group, primarily in the black community, because we had more runners in the city than anything here. And we got registered voters, and we got extra in case, because we needed enough. And we presented to the council, and then they went to another level in the courts. That's when the judges, all white judges, found a way to throw it out. And the reason why they threw it out, because judges were in cahoots with the slum landlords. Right. That's how they got the slum landlords gave money for their campaign. Yeah. So they wasn't going to pay us nothing. Mm-hmm. So it kept white people in that leadership role. So after we did all of that, again, we hadn't started this organization yet. We're doing practical experience. We're learning, and what I didn't know at the time, why when we come together as black folks, we also fight each other. I did not know what that was at. So what I did, I went and got more training from a man named Saul Olinsky. He's the grandfather of community organizing. I learned a lot of great skills and tools.
I'm sorry, can you say his name one more time?
Saul, S-A-U-L, Olinsky, A-L-I-N-S-K-Y. He was a white fellow in Chicago. Mm-hmm. Many groups that train on to organize come out of his method of organizing. There's a group called Midwest Academy, IAF, Industrial Area Foundation, many, many others. I learned a lot. I learned how to do strategies, group dynamics, tactical research, how to strategically kick the man in the ass, not just reactionary, but in a clear way.
Right.
I learned all of that. But then, even if you kept, after we'd bring 20, 30 primarily black folks together, go to say, we would win some victories, but then we still have these internal fights. Yeah. So all the great skills I got didn't resolve that problem. I didn't know what was going on.
Mm-hmm. What type of skills you learned over there?
Huh?
What kind of skills you learned?
Skills I learned how to research. Mm-hmm. That's a skill. I learned how to read rooms, group dynamics. I get a group of people in a room. I can tell from just some experience, who's bullshit in the group. Yeah. I can tell, if they're talking about they got a community group, they got a nonprofit, but they ain't no real nonprofit. They got 3 people in the organization, and that's a clique. So that's a skill, a bit to read the room. You can watch folks, their body language. Yeah. I learned, how to listen. I learned how to develop leadership. When I do my community work, when I began, I didn't really know I was an organizer. I was doing it, but I didn't call myself an organizer. He helped me understand what organizing was about. Organizing is bringing people together. Don't worry, it's cool. Right. Organizing is bringing people together for a purpose and intent. Mm-hmm. And as an organizer, my job description is a motivator. Yes. You're a motivator?
Yes.
My job is an agitator, but I'm a strategic. I know how to piss people off strategically. Some people do it just because they're mad.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right.
Anytime I'm agitating in the community, my objective is to agitate, to bring people in, not to run them away.
Correct. Yes. Absolutely.
And I'm strategically doing that. I'm jumping on a man. Mm-hmm. I don't give a damn about the man, but I'm jumping on him or her to reach my community.
Yes. Right. So it's like holding people accountable.
Holding them accountable, but jumping on them won't hold them accountable. the way you get a politician or anybody accountable, we have to talk what accountability really means. That's where we use very loosely. You know, when you do your work, what's going to keep you all accountable?
Right.
Because you can have the great love for the community and do all this great podcast, but it's about the community.
Right. I think the community keeps me accountable.
So the question
I have integrity.
is, how will they keep you accountable? Because we can't say that. We got to say, no, well, how do they keep you accountable? Because most folks in the community, because of years of oppression, are unconscious.
True.
So when you're looking at the podcast, many times they're unconscious. So does your podcast wake them up?
Slowly.
You know, yeah, it can begin to do that, but you got to, you know, to have a podcast, to have a community, to do all this stuff, to fight injustice, and it doesn't wake the community up, because sometimes what we do will put them further to sleep.
I agree.
So how do you know when you're raising people, what we call it the internal dynamics of leadership development? It was a process to mess us up. It's got to be a process
To build back
to wake
up.
them up. And that's where the accountability come in. Once you wake people up, then you got accountability. Jumping on somebody don't give you no accountability, because everybody jumps for opportunistic reasons. I did it for you, and I'm talking, I did it.
No, I
I played games. A good organizer can be a good manipulator. There's a fine line. And I knew how to play games. You know, we manipulate. So now that I realize if I really want to develop leadership, I don't know how you do that, what does that really mean? I also got to study why we don't have that kind of leadership.
Right.
It was a process, you know. And but anyway, still going to community stuff. So I got these skills, which are very helpful, but it didn't help me to deal with that internal stuff, which I didn't understand it. I kept doing the same thing over and over again. And what I realized is I got these great skills. What I realized, if you give somebody some skills and they have not dealt with their racism, they can become a skillful racist and get certified, go to school, like social workers. You know, we do a lot of training for social workers at Columbia, Fordham, all over the country. And when social workers come out of school, they know nothing about racism, including the black ones, except what black people live every day, but they don't get an analysis from the social work school. They tell you social work is a helping profession, and that's what you do in social work. But if you help somebody, most social workers put our community to sleep with that, because they operate out of a dependency model. Like, so anyway, after a while,
Right.
I realized something still was missing. We hadn't started this organization yet.
Right.
Still doing community work in Treme, trial and error, experiences, up and downs. You know, people fighting you, the community fighting you. They love you, the same ones that you helping will talk about you.
Yeah.
Talk about you, will beat you up. That's when you know you're in the community, when you get beat up a few times. Now, if you're doing community work long distance, because more people afraid to even go in the community. So that's one. So I say, well, racism got to be an issue. Now, I thought as a black man, I knew all about racism,
Right.
but I didn't.
Right.
I understand discrimination. I understand bigotry. I understand the Proud Boys dynamics. I understand police killings. But we do not have a systemic analysis.
Gotcha.
So when you deal with racism, you got to have a systemic analysis. Most of us operate not out of systemic analysis. We operate out of a needs analysis, a do-good analysis, see the community as a victim analysis, a paternalistic, we got to help those poor people, or what they call a white man's burden analysis, which means them people can't take care of themselves. We got to take care of them for them.
Yeah, and teach them how to do it our way, because our way is better.
All of those ways that people operate. Most of us who saying when you talk about empowering, we don't empower because we don't do no power analysis. So when I realized, I thought I knew, being in the black community, I figured, you know, I didn't. And since I traveled all around the country, around the world, like South Africa, Soweto, Johannesburg, Puerto Rico, Harlem, black churches, on and on and on. We do this work in all these places. All black folks, we do not have a systemic analysis. Yet we talk about fighting a man, we ain't got a man analysis. So what made me realize that if I'm gonna deal with racism, because now maybe racism got something to do with why people fighting each other. I didn't know. So I couldn't find nobody that was teaching dealing with racism.
That's around the country or in
I couldn't know
Louisiana?
nobody in the media area, and they had books out. Of course, you had people like Angela Davis,
Yeah.
and I worked with Angela Davis. Angela Davis and I was on. And I went to Cuba for us. We're part of a group called the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Oppression. And what we do, we get political prisoners out of jail. I got to be part of the organization, but I was new. There's another brother who did time named Reverend Ben Shavers. But when I got to be part of the group, help get political prisoners out of jail who was incarcerated for political reasons, they asked me to go to Cuba. Because Angela was supposed to go to Cuba, and because they're loving Cuba. Everybody, Angela's all over the. And I went in her presence, and I was honored to go. Yes. I've been the bodyguard for a brother named Reverend Ben Shavers, and he's now with the United Church of Christ. So I couldn't find anybody that was talking about racism. I heard people talking about it, the Angela, the Black Panther Party. I knew, so all that was out there, the Dr. King Civil Rights Movement, So, but I don't know nobody was teaching it. And what I realized, this is all in retrospect, from the experience I had in Trimmy. Any kind of work we do, we got to understand racism. Because if we don't, whatever work you may be doing for community, racism will get in the way every time. I don't care if it's an all-black group, black and Latino, white, black, because every movement has been stopped by racism. The women's movement, the populist movement, the labor movement, the civil rights movement. Every time they've been with the gay and lesbian community, everyone have been stopped of racism. So I used to go to New York all the time, and I worked with the National Methodist Church, working on community groups from all over the country, and I'd go there and help. We meet these groups, and I met a brother who was in Ohio named Dr. Jim Dunn. I met him because he was doing work with the church, and I was, and we just would meet for about a few months, and then we kept meeting. We go to New York, maybe once a month, doing this work with this National Methodist group. And he and I would talk. We would just talk. And he got a PhD from Columbia. I didn't know many black men that had gotten a PhD that talked the way he talked. And I didn't have any degree, but I had practical experience. And he was teaching community organizing at Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio. And one day we went to a national meeting, the National Black Independent Political Party in Philadelphia. We took a train ride from New York, all the black leaders from around the country, and some were from parts of Africa. We went there to be a part of that. And we talked on the way on a train, about a 4-hour train ride. That's when we started to say, you know what? We know both of us saying racism gets in the way, and we need to do something about it.
Right.
So we then decided to start the People's Institute. I'm giving you a long history, but it didn't pop up like that. Right. So him and I started it in 1980. All the experience I had working in Treme, I work in the Ninth Ward, I work in Magnolia. I work primarily with tenants.
Okay.
I was a tenant leader. I work nationally and locally, bringing tenants together and giving them this analysis so the tenants, it ain't just me, the tenants know how to fight for themselves. I also work with this brother's mother and his brother. He's a member of the Black Panther Party here in the Ninth Ward. He was in a shootout.
Okay.
He don't talk about it a lot, and he's a minister now. He just had a grand opening of a museum a couple of days ago. I couldn't make it in Plaquemine. Similar, like because he takes a lot of pictures. And one day he came, and some of the Panther Party came to me and trained me before this institute, and asked me and my boy Jim, who's passed. Now, there's a couple of Jims I mentioned. One is Jim Hayes. He was with the Treme group. Dr. Jim Dunn was with the People's Institute. These Jams get.
Yeah.
Yeah. This brother came to me with some of the members of the Panther Party and asked me, and would we be willing to have a breakfast program? Because we worked on Lafitte Project. And we said, of course. Yeah. So we had the first breakfast program by the Panther Party in Treme, in Lafitte Project,
Who was funding that?
Huh?
Who was like funding?
No funds. Donations, thrift shops, primarily. We didn't get no money.
All right.
Never really got any money. We worked at a sister volunteer at times, like you got involved. Her name was Jerry Slaws, but they call her Mama Suma now.
Yes.
Mama Suma died. She was about 80 something when she died. A lot of her kids are still around. Mark Laws used to run a place called Oyster Shell Club on Bayou Road. But anyway, yeah. So and they all knew. She knew Vince and all of that. That. But I got the mama. Okay, but anyway, this brother. We talking about the Panther Heart and Hampton, all that stuff. This brother just had a thing there. But I say this to say is that while all this was going on, I'm trying to. I lose track of time and when certain dates are.
That's okay. We're doing good.
But while we started the institute,
19.
yeah, I got that squared away. But in between that time, or maybe right after that time, I started working with his mother. And she went, because in Platinum Parish, they got black fishermen that wasn't getting their just due. White folks had all the big boats. And my wife is from Plaquemine. So I used to go out there and, coat her.
Well, my wife's family is from Black.
Oh, yeah? Okay, we probably hooked up some. It probably got hooked. We keep talking, we're going to know.
Yeah, we're going to find somebody.
But my husband's the Anchorlord.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so Anchorlord. But, and I used to go down there all the time, and the brothers down there, some of her uncles and cousins had these small boats. Yeah. They put sacks of oysters. That's how they got their livelihood. The white big fishermen had big boats, and what they were saying, these small iron claws that get oysters was messing up the oyster bed, which means they couldn't produce oysters, which wasn't true. But at that time, white people would say whatever they want. They had laws passed. So they asked me, because they saw me on TV a bunch of times. It was going with my wife now, but they also knew I was an activist in New Orleans. And they always see me on TV and in the news. So one day they asked my wife to ask me to come down and meet with about 10 black fishermen and told me their story. Yeah. And I said, and they had a man named Leander Perez. You got to know that history. He was a white man, was the parish president. He was a non-dictator, non-segregationist. This man was so racist, he used to separate his cows. You come down the highway, he had black cows on his side and white cows. It was a symbolic thing. It's crazy shit, but crazy. But this man people around the world knew him.
The cows had
Leander Perez. Mm-hmm. But anyway, we was able to organize for several years. I brought lawyers down there to help me in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. We were able to get that law overturned. We got equity for folks. We got that state legislative law change. And the organization came out to be a group called a Fishermen and Concerned Citizens Association. And it's still in existence. And even though it was black men, a lot of the black women that worked closely with me. I always had black women working close with me, even in St. Thomas. That's another struggle I'll let you know about. But anyway, we made major changes down there for years. People down there didn't have running water and all that sort of stuff. We was on 60 Minutes with it. There's been a lot of stuff going on in that town. So that was going on like beginning of this. I was going back and forth, and we're going traveling and getting this off the ground. Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of stuff going on in Platinum, a lot of stuff with his mother and with him, but mostly with his mother and other fishermen. All these people around the wall here, Barbara Major, the white minister back over there, white lady there, her husband is my co-founder with me. Her name is Diana Dunn. I work with all these people. And that's Dr. Jim Dunn, the co-founder with the guitar. Yeah. He's from Ohio. Me and his brother got together and we started the People's Institute. That's one other piece I want to tell you about St. Thomas in public housing, the St. Thomas Housing Development. We trained those residents, and one day the residents got together because there were 20 community groups in that area uptown. And they were all making money off about 800 residents living in public housing, always getting served by these community groups. The problem with these community groups, they was all using the numbers to get their grants. They say, I work with all these people in the projects. Well, that's fine. But then when the residents ask them to come together, because we think y'all could do a better job collectively.
Yeah.
So they asked me and his sister to give help with the letter to all these 20 different groups. All came, we want to come to a meeting, all came but one. It was a health clinic. So we did, we did the research, said, now this one didn't come, this clinic, we're going to find out who's funding the clinic. We found out who was funding the clinic, so we sent them another letter with CC copies to their funders. They came to the next meeting. And from that we formed the Irish Channel Consortium, which means run by the residents. And we took this training the residents so they can have an analysis. And all these groups, every so often we get a report card from the residents whether they were doing good work or not. And now the health clinic, which didn't come, I'm on the board of the health clinic right now. And because it's now one of the federally qualified clinics in the state, we now have 9 sites. One in DeGaulle, we've got 4 or 5 right now. And we all got federal dollars. One of the best clinics in the country. And I'm one of the community representatives on it. And all of the doctors got to come to my workshop. They don't come, they can't come practice medicine in there. And they come from the best hospitals, come from Oshner. They want to do community health clinic. Well, if you got to have an analysis of the community.
Correct, yeah.
Because the immunity, when it's being oppressed, it creates blood pressure, creates diabetes, and y'all don't treat that. Y'all don't write about it. So if you're going to come in and give services, you got to understand racism. And for over close to 15 years, everybody in the clinic got to go to the training. So we did that for years. It's another aspect of the work. Now, going back to this, and then we kind of winding down a little bit.
Okay.
When Jim Jai started, we wanted to make sure that that everybody understands racism who's working in the community. Because some people doing community work who are doing organizing or doing disorganizing because they don't understand racism. All black groups, white and black, Latino and black. And so we wanted to make sure. And the reason why I started this for me, because racism kept having internal fights. See, because racism creates the sickness that makes us fight.
Yes.
But people don't know where it comes from.
Yeah, people need to hear that. Racism creates a sickness.
Yeah, it creates the pathology.
Yes.
See, people think racism creates injustice, but it creates, and I can show it to you on a board. Want me to show it to you on a board? I could write it up on a board, show you how. You got time for that?
Yeah.
Could you put that board up for me? I'm going to show you what I mean by that, because once you understand this board, it'll make sense what we're talking about.
Yeah, I could do it. You keep on talking while I put this up.
Yeah, no problem. No,
Just keep going through the story.
Okay. As I said, racism creates injustice, like housing problem, health problem, environment. And so we develop programs to deal with that. But you have to understand that racism also creates a sickness. The sickness it creates, and it starts inside our mother's womb, where black women and women of color are told by these systems that you're nothing, the way they get treated, the way they deal with women's health issues. The baby's inside. We believe the baby can feel the disrespect to the mother. I can't tell you the chemical mechanism, but it's generational how black women have been dealt with. Yeah. And so when your mama get treated bad, and you know that, and when you come here as a baby, then the system starts treating you bad because you already internalized some stuff already. And there's no question in my mind about it. So that's where the sickness comes in at, the pathology. And at some point, we can explain the different manifestations on how the sickness plays out. Protecting white people, colorism, all these things play out, which we talk about in our workshop. Okay, now can you... Good. Now,
Yeah.
you know what might be good? This is what you could do for me. because I think it's not gonna hold up correctly. It's straight up, it ain't gonna hold up. What I want you to do, can you take one of those sheets off? Take me a clear sheet off there. Raise that up, put that back. Yeah,
take a clear one off.
yeah. Matter give me the whole thing. Give me the whole thing.
There you go.
Let's see if I can just take one off and write something up real quickly for you. Spend a lot of time with it. It's got sticker on it, I think. Huh? Yeah, it's got sticker on it.
I like these. Big post.
Yeah, stylo. Okay. You can put that on the floor somewhere, bro.
There you go.
Okay.
We are in class. I need y'all to pay attention.
Okay. Here's the key, what I want you to remember.
Okay.
I want to make sure this don't go through the wall. I don't think it'll go through. I got it. I'll work.
Yeah, we don't want it to go through the wall.
There's
2 pieces up there.
Okay, yeah. There's a thing, out of our experience, when people are doing community work, most folks are operating out of a needs analysis or see people as a victim analysis. And people do have needs, so we don't want to minimize.
Moving to the rhythm of the bass, I'm moving to the rhythm of the beat. Feeling like I'm in the Middle East, but I'm just in the middle of the East. New Orleans mean city streets. Some niggas gotta steal just to eat, just to put some Jordans on their feet. Them bars will put the steel to your cheek. Oatmeal